welcome to World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing on CCTV News. I'm your host, Tian Wei. On today's program, the newly elected head of Taiwan's Kuomintang Party leads a delegation to the Chinese mainland for the first time. What will her visit mean for the cross-strait ties? And also in Beijing is Malaysia's Prime Minister Najib Razak's visit. This visit means warming ties between China and yet another ASEAN country. Could this be the start of a trend? And we begin our show here in Beijing, where Taiwan's Kuomintang Party leader hsiu-chu has met with her counterpart here on China's mainland, Xi Jinping. Heng called her visit a trip of peace and said she will seek to maintain cross-strait civil exchanges. On Wednesday, she will attend the Cross-Strait Peace and Development Forum. Before we begin the discussion about the significance of her visit, let's take a look at what she's been up to recently.
Upon arriving at the Beijing International Airport on Monday, Han was received by Zhang Zhijun, head of the Taiwan Work Office of the Communist Party of China Central Committee.
It's a bit chilly here in Beijing, but it doesn't matter. Our hearts are warm. The cold weather doesn't matter.
Tuesday afternoon, Xi Jinping met with a delegation led by hsiu-chu at the Great Hall of the People. Xi says both parties should consolidate the common political foundation of the 92 consensus, which commits to the One China principle. Also, two parties should maintain the peaceful development of cross-strait relations, cooperate and commit to the revival of the Chinese nation. Before the meeting, Han chose to spend time with young entrepreneurs. She visited Zhongguancun, a technology hub in Beijing, and talked with young people from Taiwan who have started up businesses on the mainland.
The startup groups in the mainland are very down-to-earth and develop, which helps to stimulate the spirit of our Taiwan groups.
Over the past 2 decades, cross-strait relations have improved significantly thanks to a series of historic meetings. In November 2015, Xi Jinping and Ma Ying-jeou, the top leaders of both parties, held a historic face-to-face meeting in Singapore. It was the first meeting between the leaders of the two parties since 1949. During the meeting, they fully acknowledged the fruits of the peaceful development of cross-strait ties since 2008. For Han's visit this time, the primary aim is to deepen interaction between the Communist Party of China and the Kuomintang in accordance with the common political foundation of the 1992 consensus and help improve cross-strait relations.
And now, to discuss more about the hsiu-chu's visit to the Chinese mainland, we have in our Beijing studio Mr. Zhongho Tao, who is a researcher in Taiwan studies at the Chinese Academy. Meanwhile, joining us from Taipei in Taiwan, we are joined by Joanna Lei, former legislator and head of the research at the Changhua 21st Century think tank. Welcome. Meanwhile, joining us from Washington, D.C. in the U.S., Mr. Douglas Paul, Vice President of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Of course, Mr. Paul has been working in Taiwan for quite a number of years. Welcome to the three of you. First of all, may I have your idea, Ms. Lei? This visit, more of a gesture or more of real essence?
Well, certainly I think the timing and the issue on the table are both extremely significant. Timing-wise, since Tsai Ing-wen took office on May 20th, due to her strong position supporting the pro-Taiwan independent agenda, most of the official communication across Taiwan Strait has been suspended. So a party-to-party second track of communication becomes a lot more important than when KMT was the ruling party. And in terms of issue, while there were prior KMT-CPC forum, those fora never focused on the peace agenda. Rather, it only focused on cultural exchanges, economic and trade issues, as those were one of the two agenda items established on 2005 by Lian Zhan and Hu Jintao. So the peace agenda was never formally on the table, and this is the first time it is on the table.
Peace agenda on the table, exactly in this agenda. What are the content we should really pay attention to? Is it likely to change the nature of relations between these two parties and even reshape, as some analysts predict, the situation in Taiwan politically?
Yeah, it will consolidate the political trust between CPC and KMT, since both Xi Jinping and Hong Hsiu-chu addresses 1992 consensus in their remarks, and will lay a great foundation for the future development between CPC and KMT. And this will also input a great momentum for the relationship between the two sides, I mean, between Chinese mainland and Taiwan. And I think Hong Hsiu-chu's visit will, of course, be very significant since it will input or it will enhance the cross-strait economic cooperation, the cultural exchange, and people-to-people contact.
Well, a lot of on the agenda, cultural and economic, together with the people-to-people exchanges. That's a lot of content, I have to say. Mr. Paul, you've been working in Taiwan from the American side for quite a number of years. What would this visit mean for Mr. Tsai Ing-wen, who is now heading the administration now in Taiwan?
Well, I think it's much more meaningful to the Kuomintang party than it is to Tsai Ing-wen. The KMT, the party, is in very poor shape domestically in Taipei, and it has a lot of work to reconstitute itself. Probably will have to make some adjustments in leadership over the longer term. Under these circumstances, I can understand why China would want to play the long game and try to invest in the continued institutional relationships between the two parties and in the policy foundation, the political foundation, which is the 92 consensus or one China policy that China advocates. And so I see that's why there's a careful attention to protocol, the warm reception for her. Your expectations under control.
What kind of expectations? Are you keeping your expectations under control, Mr. Hong? Mr. Zhong, rather.
Just to add one point, that is, for your question, it will, I think, exert a great pressure on Tsai Ing-wen, since, most Taiwanese will wonder why KMT could have that capability to conduct a good relationship with the Chinese mainland, why DPP or Tsai Ing-wen could not have that capability. This undoubtedly will exert a great pressure on Tsai Ing-wen. And another point is the exchange between KMT and the CPC would set a good example for DPP. That is, if DPP could accept 1992 consensus just like KMT, then CPC could conduct its relationship with
okay,
DPP.
Mr. Zhong, several points you have already mentioned. I have to do it one by one. One interesting point, Ms. Lei, is whether the people here in Taiwan would consider the achievements of this specific visit by the head of the Kuomintang party to the mainland as a great advantage for the party over the TPP, or rather over the DPP, or is it going to be one of those already within their expectation because they know the Kuomintang is having a better relationship with the Chinese Communist Party rather than the DPP itself? And even though that, despite of that fact, they still have Tsai Ing-wen in power. So how much expectation do you have this trip would inject vitality into the Kuomintang party in Taiwan?
Well, certainly when Tsai Ing-wen ran her leadership campaign, she focused on maintenance of status quo without specifying how she would do that. So a lot of people, after she took office, after the May 20th and October 10th speeches, have cast certain doubts in terms of whether Tsai Ing-wen will be effectively maintain the status quo. As at that backdrop, Hong Hsiu-chu's visit will have a particular significance not only to KMT but also to other people who are questioning how Tsai Ing-wen will maintain status quo across Taiwan Straits. And for Hong Hsiu-chu, she would have three tasks ahead of her. The first one is to reaffirm KMT's long-standing position on 92 consensus and the new position ushered in by Lian Zhan and Hu Jintao in 2005. And the second one is particularly important, is to introduce the new peace platform, a new party platform adopted on September 4th to her counterpart in mainland China. And thirdly, certainly she would hope to establish a high-level party-to-party communication platform. In this particular instance, we see both parties will have 7 people joining the meeting. So she would establish new party communication platform. In the event of future needs, she will be able to help Taiwanese to resolve their issues both on Taiwan or in mainland.
Okay, well, Mr. Paul, for the 3 goals mentioned by Ms. Lei, the third one probably is the easiest one for Ms. Hong to achieve, because it's about a platform between the 2 parties, Chinese Communist Party and also the Kuomintang Party. But the other 2 goals, one is to maintain the consensus about achieving 1992 consensus, which is about one China. The other 2 is a peace platform between the mainland and Taiwan. Those does not only take the efforts of the Kuomintang, but also the ruling party in Taiwan and the public consensus as well. So, Mr. Paul, what do you make of these?
Well, as I tried to imply earlier, the polls in Taiwan are still running against a rapprochement with the mainland, running in favor of the Tsai Ing-wen's distancing from the Ma Ying-jeou platform of relations with the mainland. It's going to take a while for that to turn around, if it ever does, and probably it will be based on material considerations. I think it was important for hsiu-chu to go visit the science and technology sections of Beijing to show that there's an economic pot of gold still on the mainland, that Taiwan still needs that relationship for economic benefit. But I think at this moment, people are not yet disappointed in Tsai Ing-wen enough to abandon their hope that she can find some sort of version of the status quo that can maintain some distance from the mainland for the majority of people who vote on the island. Again, that could change over time because of material considerations or because of political pressures, but I don't think it's going to change soon.
All right. When we talk about the polls, when we talk about ideas, people, of course, at different times have different ideas about what their priorities are. DDP and also the Kuomintang have different ideas for Taiwan. In a recent telephone survey by the Kuomintang, nearly 52% of respondents said they supported its efforts in carving a new future for Taiwan by introducing a peace platform to promote peace exchanges with China's mainland. Of course, those are being surveyed among the Kuomintang party members. Having said that, though, what do you make of it, Mr. Zhong, of the 3 ideas earlier mentioned by Ms. Lei, particularly the first 2, which needs to have quite a strong consensus among all, even among all political parties in Taiwan?
Yeah, that shows most Taiwan people support the peaceful development across Taiwan Strait. And, you know, the peace and stability across Taiwan Strait could benefit those common people in Taiwan. For example, those farmers and fishers could sell their agricultural products to Taiwan, so they could earn a lot of money. And another point, those businessmen, I mean Taiwanese businessmen in Chinese mainland could continue to invest in Chinese mainland. So all of them support the peaceful development. So they of course support the peace platform. I mean, between CPC and KMT. And the most important reason is Taiwan people are just worried or concerned about the future development across Taiwan Strait. They're just worried whether the future of the Taiwan across Taiwan Strait relations will meet some uncertainties or some turbulence. If in there could meet some uncertainties, then the outer environment could be in danger. That would be that would set a great shadow for the Taiwan development.
Of course, coming from the China's mainland, many people here focus on the economic factor about Taiwan's future. But for those in Taiwan, on the island, people are talking about different issues. This right before the election, there was huge debate about the advantages between the 2 parties. And you were originally coming from the Kuomintang party, but you know what the Kuomintang party is now experiencing right now. It has to re-streamline itself after the election, Mr. Ma Ying-jeou earlier, who is the former head of the Kuomintang, also met with the Chinese Communist Party leader, Mr. Xi Jinping. That was supposed to be a grand gesture coming from Mr. Xi toward Mr. Ma's achievements and work. But on the other hand, the party itself seemed to need to have a urgent freshen up, shall we say, to move forward. Ms. Lei.
Well, certainly KMT needs to find its hearts and souls and find a new reason for being, to be able to rally up its supporters and tell them that we're leading you to a particular direction. And here is the issue. Before the election, nobody has really challenged the peaceful status across Taiwan Straits. So while KMT kept reassuring people that the political foundation of cross-strait relations are very important in terms of the development within Taiwan, people did not have any experience to say, what if it doesn't exist? And after the May 20th and after the October 10th, if you ask the rank and files in Taiwan, like I spoke to, taxi drivers, street peddlers, they have experienced a crunching of economic belts. And they understand that the prosperities and a lot of friendship and hospitality we enjoyed in the past did not come in vain. It came with a precondition, that is, people across the Taiwan Straits recognize each other as brothers and would like to help each other in tough times and good times. So now Tsai Ing-wen is going to be challenged not just by political elites, but she's going to be asked by taxi drivers and street peddlers on how do you ensure our future. And I think this will be very slow coming, but it's already in its work.
It seems that, Mr. Zhong, the challenge faced two parties in Taiwan are very different.
Yeah.
One is how to revitalize itself,
exactly.
which is the Kuomintang party.
Yeah.
The other, of course, DDP, is about what can you bring to the people in Taiwan? What
Yeah.
about the economic future?
Yeah.
Even though the questions are different, but as we earlier mentioned several times, Taiwan moving forward needs consensus.
Yeah, exactly.
So what would this mean? I mean, the moving factors about the strengths of two parties, consensus about the public in Taiwan, what would this mean about the opportunity for cooperation, if there is any, between these two parties?
If there is any cooperation between DPP and KMT, then there should be peaceful development across Taiwan Strait. Without peaceful development across Taiwan Strait, then Taiwan could not enjoy an peaceful outer environment. Then Taiwan could not enjoy a broad future. But the political foundation or political basis for the peaceful development should be 1992 consensus. There is a little bit difference between KMT and DPP.
Okay,
So,
Mr. Ho, Mr. Zhou, because you are coming from the mainland,
Yeah.
so may I ask you specifically, what kind of gesture, for example, coming from DDP
Yeah.
or coming from the now leader in Taiwan, Mr. Tsai,
Yeah.
that would give the mainland the signal that they are subscribing to 1992 consensus, they are subscribing to peaceful development across the Taiwan Strait. What kind of signal can you?
Okay, that's really a good question. If Tsai Ing-wen or DPP could abolish or even just freeze the so-called Taiwan independence clause, then it could be regarded or taken as a positive signal.
Okay. There we go. Very specific. Let's
Yeah.
go to Mr. Paul. Only from an observer's perspective, how much political capital does it take Ms. Tsai to do that and how much will that really change the picture?
Well, we had a pretty interesting debate within the DPP over a year ago about whether or not to freeze the independence clause of the party charter, and they couldn't quite bring themselves to do that. I don't think that's been taken out of the closet. It's still in there. If they absolutely need something, maybe they'll go back to that issue. But they don't feel the need to do that yet. They're still enjoying political support in the polls that for a non-reunification stance, but people don't want disruption either. So Ms. Tsai has occupied a gray zone between unification and independence, where she thinks she can get the most support, or where she thinks the balance of political will is in Taiwan. as time passes, as Taiwan confronts the headwinds of a difficult global economy in which it depends for trading and marketing its products and seeking investment, and as cross-strait trade is not growing, as Professor Zhong just said, then maybe that consensus will shift and people will look for a more pragmatic approach to cross-strait relations. It's going to take some time. It's also going to take the KMT to articulate its policy more effectively than it has in the last months, because Ms. Hong is seen as not really articulating policy in ways that make it more appealing to deal with the mainland. They see her as being more of a spokesman for the mainland rather than someone who can stand between Taiwan and the mainland and advocate for Taiwan's interests.
All right. It's very interesting, Ms. Lei. It seems that what Mr. Paul is trying to suggest here, that is, the KMT has to do its own homework in order to bring itself up to a position with which Ms. Tsai from the DDP would like to negotiate or sit down or discuss with when it comes to the peaceful development across the Taiwan Strait. But that is exactly the difficulty Ms. Hong is now facing. So she has both the reason and the result all as one at this moment for building her party.
Well, let me take two specific examples. In the past, we often view unification and independence as in the x-axis. So you look at people pro-independent or pro-unification. But this is the first time hsiu-chu introduced a y-axis in. That is to say, if you can keep peace, you can choose among all different options. But if you risk war, then none of the options will be good for Taiwan. So the whole idea of the September 4th new party platform that focuses on peace accord or peace approaches by the KMT Party Congress is a new introduction to this very complex issue, number one. But number two is, I don't think Tsai Ing-wen is experiencing any political pressure from the so-called pro-unification camp. In fact, she has been yielding towards the pro-independence camp in a very major way, such as in ways in which she discharges her executive duties. In her nomination of Supreme Court justices, she picked 7 pro-independent justices as her nominees.
Right.
So at this point, I don't see any reason or any sign of Tsai Ing-wen moving back to a more middle way. She is actually leaning heavily towards pushing a Taiwan independent agenda. As such, hsiu-chu and the KMT she leads will be a backdrop or a very important second track of communication across Taiwan Straits. In case of unlikely events when Taiwan needs direct communication with mainland China, maybe there will not be through a government official channels, but could help by the KMT party-to-party channel.
I see. At the fate of Taiwan in the crossroad, how much role will Kuomintang play? Ms. Hong as head of the Kuomintang play, and how much that would take the negotiations and the wrestling between the two political parties in Taiwan? Those are all uncertain questions that needs answering in the future. For now, thank you so much for the three of you for being with us and help us to understand better about the situation. Zhong Tao, Joanna Lei, Douglas Paul. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. You're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Still to come on our program. A high-speed railway proposal, a deal for coastal patrol vessels. China and Malaysia are linking hands in area and military. So what does this mean for bilateral ties and also the situation in the region? You are watching World Insight, coming to you live from Monday to Friday, every day on CCTV News. Also in China now is Malaysia's Prime Minister Najib Razak. His 7-day tour this time will be his 3rd visit to China since he took office in the year 2009. So what's new for this traditional friendship between Beijing and Kuala Lumpur?
New highs and new areas. Malaysia's Prime Minister Najib Razak is paying an official visit to China, bringing along with him dozens of government leaders and business people. Chinese Premier Li Keqiang held talks with him, and the two leaders witnessed the signing of 10 cooperation documents, including a significant defense deal. Just last week, Najib said Malaysia and China are committed to achieving new highs and entering into new areas of cooperation. China also thinks highly of this visit.
China believes Prime Minister Najib's visit will further enhance bilateral strategic trust, deepen our friendship, and advance the comprehensive strategic partnership.
And when it comes to military ties, China and Malaysia have always maintained a healthy relationship. Last year, a large-scale joint drill was held, and this time, Malaysia is going to purchase coastal patrol vessels from China. Since 2009, China has been Malaysia's largest trading partner, and Malaysia remains China's largest trading partner among ASEAN. And further cooperation in infrastructure, especially in the high-speed rail sector, is expected. And despite disputes over the South China Sea, bilateral relations still remain close, as both countries are open to dialogue and negotiation. And no doubt, under China's Belt and Road Initiative, cooperation between the two countries will reach higher levels.
And for more on Prime Minister Najib's visit to China from Malaysia, we are joined here in Beijing, first of all, Mr. Yang Hsiu-chu, Senior Research Fellow at the China Institute of International Studies. Welcome, sir. Meanwhile, joining us from Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, Mr. Rasdan Mohammad Izzah, who is the chairman and chief executive of the Institute for Strategic and International Studies in his home country, Malaysia. Welcome as well, Mr. Izzah. I want to begin with you, Mr. Izzah, if I can.
Thank you.
What would this visit mean for,
yes,
let's just say, territorial disputes between China and Malaysia?
Well, this visit is certainly something that will bring the relations to a new high, as the Prime Minister has said. As already mentioned, this is the third official visit by the Prime Minister since he took office in 2009. And this is in a series of visits undertaken by Malaysian Prime Ministers to China. And of course, last year we had Prime Minister Li Keqiang visit Malaysia, and the significance of this visit, as we can see, is the signing of these agreements between the governments as well as between the private sectors or companies between the two countries.
In other words, you're suggesting, Mr. Izzah, more exchanges at different levels between the two countries. That's likely to help with some of the most stubborn issues, for example, territorial?
Well, if you're talking about territorial issues, I suppose what you're saying is the issues in the South China Sea. Yes, those are issues that need to be resolved at some point or another. But of course, I think the emphasis here between the leaders is on cooperation between the two countries.
Mr. Yang, Mr. Izzah, help us to understand the picture much better from a Malaysian perspective. Help us to understand from the Chinese perspective. There has been earlier a visit by the Filipino president, Mr. Duterte, which China also had some territorial issues with about the South China Sea. And now we have another prime minister coming from Malaysia who visited us for the third time. Is this going to be an interesting opening and trend about talks, dialogues, different levels of exchanges that eventually will lead us to the answer to some of the most stubborn issues?
Yeah, well, first of all, I can say China and Malaysia share the same way of thinking regarding the territorial disputes. That contribute to the stable relationship between China and Malaysia, although the territorial disputes remains there. And by the same token, the recent China-Philippines relationship returned to the stability because of the two sides share the same way of thinking. Say, the territorial disputes is a tail the comprehensive bilateral relation is a dog. It should be the dog swag the tail rather than tail swag the dog. The predecessor of Duterte did the opposite way. That make turmoil about the bilateral relation and finally damage seriously Philippines' national interests.
Right.
So regarding to the comparison between the Duterte's visit and Prime Minister Najib's visit, I think they shared a similar common ground, say all the three sides focusing on the economic growth, focusing on the inclusive cooperation for the sustainable economic development. So that is the common ground for the individual bilateral relations.
Mr. had the honor earlier during the first visit of Prime Minister Najib to China to have an exclusive interview with him. My impression then was he is very much focusing on the all possibilities of economic cooperation between Malaysia and China. How things have evolved over the years and the priorities inside the country for him and his administration this time to look at China once again. And this is not just one side, export to China, but also China getting some of the possible projects in Malaysia. Mr. Iza.
Well, if you look at the views of the Prime Minister about relations with China, firstly, you have to look at the history of relations between Malaysia and China. The diplomatic relations were established by his father when Tun Abdul Razak was the Prime Minister in 1974. Now, of course, the tenure of the Prime Minister since 2009, there are many things that have happened in the context of relations and cooperations between China and Malaysia. Trade has grown tremendously. Malaysia is China's largest trading partner in ASEAN, and of course China is Malaysia's largest trading partner, and both sides are looking at increasing trade. There are other areas of economic cooperation that they're looking at, investment, for example.
Right.
Hence the agreements that have been signed this morning. So I think the emphasis on economic cooperation is the right way to go.
The right way to go, but there are specifics. There are details as well. Mr. Yang, for example, the high-speed rail between Malaysia and Singapore. China, of course, is one of those bidders, together with Japan and some of our other countries. We'll try to get it. Shall we take political signals out of the results of these economic exchanges, contract bidding between China and Malaysia?
Well, I think the bidding for the high-speed railway is totally based on the market competition, and China has a full confidence to win in the bidding, and also China has an inclusive way of thinking. Say that's a cooperative program rather than the monopolized program. So finally, I think both participants from China and Japan can play the different roles, can make different contributions. But obviously, China will make main contribution to the joint high-speed railway between Singapore to Malaysia.
All right, Mr. Iza, of course, you are not those who are eventually deciding who is going to win the bid. But let me ask you, do you want to really read signals of these kinds of cooperations? It's not just the high-speed rail. There's also 10 patrol vessels Malaysia wants to purchase from China, for example.
I'm losing the signal.
Okay, having a little bit difficulties over there. Let me ask Mr. Yang, if you can, Mr. Iza, to comment later. Mr. Yang, what about that question?
Hello.
That China is also providing Malaysia with 10 sea patrol vessels. Some suggest this is going to be a very interesting development because it seems that Malaysia is purchasing significant defense equipment coming from China.
Well, firstly, that is an economic deal but based on the political consideration. Economic deal means China's products like patrol vessels commands the best quality, but the best prices. So that's fit to the Malaysia's, from the functions to the prices were fit Malaysia's national interests. But politically, the arms sale reflects the level of the bilateral relations. That's why the Prime Minister Najib said China was a true friend of Malaysia.
Having said that, though, Malaysia, of course, as a country, it plays different roles. Not only its bilateral roles with China, but also its roles inside the ASEAN countries. And it has been quite a significant player there. So Prime Minister Najib's visit at this quite an interesting time, how do you think other countries might take the signal? What is that? What does that mean for the others?
Well, if you look at the history of ASEAN, that is a very independent organization in this region, always play a very significant role in security and economic area. Among the ASEAN members, Malaysia always play a very unique roles, ranging from the East-oriented strategy for ASEAN to inclusive economic cooperations with both inside and outside players. And at this critical points now, Prime Minister Najib's visit will play a leading role for the new focus. Say, under the current economic situation, all the members of ASEAN with the members outside ASEAN should focus more on the joint efforts for the sustainable growth and also towards the wider range of the cooperation.
Let me also have Mr. Iza to comment about that. I'm glad you're joining us once again, Mr. Iza. Your point on, first of all, as we earlier mentioned, the defense cooperation, purchasing, and secondly, the role that Malaysia is playing within ASEAN, and what would all of this mean, cooperation between China and Malaysia, mean for the other members of that organization?
Well, you know, one has to look at relations between Malaysia and China as complementing relations between ASEAN and China and vice versa. Because ASEAN is important to Malaysia, and I'm sure China sees ASEAN as a very important neighbor and organization, because they are, all the ASEAN member countries have good relations with China. And I think it is good that ASEAN countries, in their own way, have good relations with China. And it is for the good of the region as well. Because for us, in Malaysia as well, in ASEAN, we have to accept the fact that China is a neighbor, and China is a very important neighbor. China is important economically, strategically, and also politically, and many areas of cooperation that can be forged between China and ASEAN.
Mr. Iza, before we go, final question for you. That is, China and the United States have been both great players in the Asia-Pacific region. However, both sides have realized if they make others in the region to choose one camp or the other, that is not going to be a smart choice for both countries or for the others. Having other countries such as Malaysia or some of the others in ASEAN countries can also play its own chess about how to move the other powers in the region to make a better future for its own priorities. What do you make of Malaysia's future plan at this point of a U.S. presidential election, at this point of great changes Asia-Pacific region?
Well, you see, Malaysia has always adopted a foreign policy that brings itself closer or close to everyone, to the major powers as well as others. Now, I think it is not in China's interest or the interest of the United States to play the game of trying to woo countries to one side or the other. It is the interest of everyone that we all cooperate in ensuring peace and stability in the region, in ensuring economic development, in ensuring that everyone prospers. And I think this is the goal of President Xi Jinping, to ensure that we all work for a common destiny.
Okay, Mr. Yang, final point from you about that.
Well, this visit will signal that China-Malaysia bilateral relations will be upgraded to higher level with the enhancement and enlargement of the cooperation between two countries. That will also contribute to the better relationship between China and ASEAN for better tomorrow.
All right. We are looking forward to all these new and exciting developments. Everybody is making their own choices. Yang Hsiu and Rasta Mohammed Isa. Thank you so much, both of you gentlemen, for being with us. That is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, you can visit our website. Type in World Insight CCTV News into your search engine, or check out our YouTube channel. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching, and tune in again tomorrow for more insights from across China and around the world. Good night.